Dear, serious, parents of Reddit, what was the worst method of raising a child you've seen or heard from someone you know? My cousin had 3 kids knowing that her parents would raise them because she was a rage addict. Now that the gross, poopy parts are done, she's suing to get custody back. Please tell me she isn't gonna win. My sil announced that books were banned as gifts for her child because she didn't want him to grow up to be a nerd. My dumbass brother was completely okay with that. It's been 19 years and the kid is exactly as stupid as you'd suspect. It's a crying dang shame. I knew this lady who let her preschool age kid basically be in charge of her. He got to pick what they did, what they ate, when to go home if she was visiting us. It was ridiculous. He was insanely spoiled and freaked out all the time if things weren't going exactly his way. Sometimes I wonder how he's doing now. He would be around 11 these days. Maybe he had psychic powers and would banish her to the cornfield if she didn't. I'm not a parent myself, but I am part of a group for disabled individuals, and there are so many people whose parents just made their life just so much worse trying to fix them whilst not actually listening to their real issues. Parents who refuse to correct their kids in any way because it was a human rights abuse to infringe on their free will. They ran around like wild animals with no respect for others. Almost ruined my cousin's wedding. I hate this so much. My kids aren't perfect and can forget their manners. My job as their parent is to correct them, teach them respect, teach them manners. It doesn't come naturally to them. I had a friend that let his perfectly healthy kid stay in diapers until he was almost 6 years old. Oh heck no, that's so expensive. My friend's mom recently had another kid, and they gave him only apple juice since he was a couple months. Now, the poor kid's teeth are rotting and falling out, and some are even growing in rotten. It's really hard to watch. He always complains about it hurting. I went to school with a kid who had no teeth left as a 6 years old because his parents put lemonade in his bottle since he was a toddler. I saw this morbidly obese toddler, maybe 2, at the airport on the travelator being hand-fed McDonald's fries by her mother and with Coke in her bottle. I knew it was Coke as I later saw her mother top it up with a can of Coke. The mother was also morbidly obese. Made me sad that this young she had messed up her daughter for life. My cousin had a daughter on the way and told my sister that a teaspoon of vodka in the baby's formula will get them to sleep and isn't enough to harm them in any way. He'd heard it from a guy he worked with. My sister told his girlfriend and she flipped the frick out about it. I doubt he ever did it himself after that, but I still wonder about the guy he worked with who shared this amazing parenting hack. I don't know who he is, but hope like frick that he wasn't speaking from experience. My cousin wasn't the brightest cookie. Honestly, this only started to slow down in the 80s. Plenty of 80s kids had a thimble full of whiskey or whatever in their milk, and go back further and it was even more common. I see a lot of snippets of different parenting styles working at a restaurant, but I can tell you the worst behaved kids are always accompanied by parents who treat them like God's gift to humanity and refuse to tell them number. I was about 14, and I slept over at a cousin's house. I used to do ballet with her and she had a younger sibling about 3 years old at the time, and she took one of her ballet slippers. Her parents had a low income so they could only afford one pair of slippers, and we spent almost an hour looking for it. It turned out she hid them in her toy box and had cut it up. Yet my older cousin got in trouble for not being responsible enough. She got grounded, and her parents basically beat her up. I didn't think much of it at the time, but now, I realize they were bad parents and I will never treat my children the way they treated my cousin. Frick them. Parents who have a really short fuse and resort to yelling and hitting does not work. One reason I don't want kid of my own is because I can get annoyed fairly easily, and little kids, while I can stand them for a short amount of time, can make me mad. It wouldn't be fair for me to have a kid till I get myself sorted out. Not having patience. I know it's hard to do all the time, but you need to have patience when a kiddo is learning something new, even when it's mundane and obvious to you. I see a lot of parents get frustrated when their kid is told to do something and it's not done instantly. The parents low-key freak and shove them out of the way or rip the thing out of the kid's hand and do it for them. This is how you become a snowplow parent and your kids grow to be helpless twits. Browsed this thread but didn't see this. In my country, India, some parents want their children to become engineers or doctors. so they start sending them to coaching institutes from the tender age of 9. I know one kid who spent half of his life going to such institutes. He didn't know that a football is something used to play. He only knew how to calculate the velocity of the football. He was shocked when someone showed him that the football can be used to play. Such parents rob these children of their childhoods and destroy their social skills. These children see other children as competitors and not friends. So sad to as play develops the lateral thinking skills critical to solving problems. Without that type of knowledge, that child is going to fail at being a doctor or engineer later in life. Telling a child no, but then giving in when said child throws a fit about it so you don't have to deal with a tantrum. This doesn't teach the child anything except that they can get what they want by acting out. Just ignore them crying. They said if they're crying they're probably just faking it to get attention and control the parent. That's how my brother was raised. Fortunately before I was born they changed their ways because they realized how fricked up it was. My mom often says how much she regrets following that advice. It works though. He learned to suppress all emotion. Haven't seen him laugh, cry or express anything as far as I can remember. Don't do that to your child. Christ, this is sad. Your poor brother. Lawnmower parents. Always clearing an easy path for their kids so that they don't ever have to struggle. Attack helicopter parents. Like lawnmower parents, but they will attack anyone who makes anything difficult for their children. I thought lawnmower was a combo of helicopter parents, always hovering over the child, no freedom for kiddo and always up their butt, and snowplow parents, which as you said clearing the path and no struggles. Not saying you're wrong, just how I viewed the terms. Amazingly the same person family. Blanket training is horribly common in some funny home teaching communities. You put the baby on a blanket and if it makes noise or leaves the blanket you hit it. It's supposed to teach toddlers self-control and respect for the rules. After realizing that for some reason her kids didn't respond well to being terrified into compliance and were afraid to learn new things, a neighbor of my grandmother now practices unschooling where she homeschools them to the minimum legal standard in a co-op and then lets them run wild to educate themselves. They have dug holes in my grandmother's yard, put firecrackers in a birdhouse and mixed assorted cleaning supplies in a storm drain to see what would happen, but apparently this is how they learn. Orthorexic parents who join diet cults, who insist that their children eat like they do. They do this under guise of eating a healthy diet, but in reality they are fulfilling a fantasy and putting that before the safety of their child. For example, if you're part of the raw fruit cult, and you have a baby and insist that they only eat fruits, the consequences are as bad as you think they would be. I saw a kid in the park the other day sitting in a pram chugging down a bottle of Coca-Cola. I'm no expert but I suspect milk and water would have been wiser choices. I watched a friend put Mountain Dew in their kid's sippy cup once. One guy I used to work with refused to vaccinate his kids because he simply thought it's not necessary. Didn't think that the vaccines were harmful or anything, just that they didn't do anything and that they were basically all placebos. Same idiot also actively refused to take his baby in for their routine checkups. To capstone everything, he quit his job 2 months before his second kid was born, which immediately ended all of his paid for medical benefits for himself and his family. I don't know if he had some sort of vendetta against medical practices or if he was just trying to subtly murder his family using ignorance and negligence, but he was a perfect walking example of don't be like this butthole. I was at Wendy's and there was a 7-ish-year-old throwing a tantrum. I heard the mom say stop it or mommy has to lick you. I thought I heard her wrong, but when I glanced around the corner a few seconds later I heard mommy has to lick you now and she was licking the full length of his face. When I left she was buying him a Frosty. My kids came crying to me one day while playing at the McDonald's playground. First, my older daughter came to me saying some boy was pushing her. Then my other daughter came crying, saying a boy was kicking her. In a mild rage, I went to the playground and told my kids to point out the kid to me. They did, and he was sitting with his parents, eating. I told the parents what my kids said. Without any dialogue at all, the mom slapped the boy in the back of the head, rather hard, and said, "Say you're sorry," and the boy yelled, "No," and he got smacked again. I left that place more off at those crappy parents than their bully child. No wonder that boy was violent if his mum has taught him that's an acceptable way to behave. My father was an alcoholic war vet. His was of raising me was to be hard on me that consisted of verbal abuse. Sooner or later I finally stood up for myself, but the damage was done. I can't connect to anyone emotionally, and most times I feel empty. Screaming doesn't work. My dad did this as well. To toughen me up, I basically just don't talk to people. I'm middle-aged. 1. A couple who barely graduated high school pulled their kids out of school because they thought the teachers were bad. Last I talked to them, they weren't teaching traditional subjects, but teaching them how to be good people with manners. 2. A dad didn't like that his son didn't eat everything on his plate, even though given adult portions, and would put what he didn't eat in the child's underpants and make him sit there for an hour while he bawled. Every night either this would happen or the child would eat until he was physically sick. 3. Very sheltered, religious homeschool curriculum. 10-year had never read a book. They had never seen a house with stairs. 4. Allowed violence because they are only kids. They can't hurt anyone. Said after their 10-year-old got angry with me and threw a big toy car at my head. My mom would loudly fat shame me in public so I would lose weight. My mother always tells me about this women who would give completely opposite signals. When the child did something bad, she told the kid it did something bad and at the same time cuddled and gave the kid loads of love. And when the kid did something good, she congratulated it, but her body language said she couldn't care less. A child here, but my mother was a real piece of work. If I did one thing wrong, she would berate me and constantly bring it up. She would never let anything go. I got a poor grade on a history test and she would just be like, "That's awful. Is that really the best you can do? This is horrible. You need to do better," and so on for a really long time. It honestly gave me so many anxiety problems about failing and disappointing people. I had a crippling fear of disappointing my teachers, like I did with my mom, and getting into trouble with them would be the worst thing in my little world. Even as a 22-year-old woman who hasn't had contact with my mother in around 10 years, I am still anxious about disappointing people and I worry about freaking up. I'm 30 years old and I'm still terrified of being in trouble. I had a set of cousins that were raised sheltered to such an extreme extent that Nintendo Power magazine was deemed too adult for them. They couldn't watch cartoons because they dealt with too mature of content for them. They looked legitimately horrified when I said the word "but" at one point. One of them was nearly out of high school and the other was just starting junior high when these rules were still in place. Needless to say, the problem with sheltering your kids is that reality is going to find its way in eventually, but now they have no built-up defense against it. So when the fact that their mom was cheating on the dad with another woman and the dad really liked pills and H came out one day, they were completely incapable of coping. I was a guest at a family gathering other than my own when I heard an attender yell at her then 3-year-old son, "You've disappointed mommy and Jesus." All I could think about was how interesting the teenage years will be. When I was in 3rd grade, I had this friend I'll call Sarah. She was my age and her mom was raising her pretty much alone. No dad in the picture, but she was close to HR mom's side of the family. Whatever. One day Sarah's brushing her teeth in our bathroom because she was spending the night and spits a shitload of blood into the sink. My mom, being a mom, was like WTF and got Sarah to open her mouth and sees that every single one of Sarah's back molars are completely rotting full of cavities and one of her molars is completely rotted down to a grey crater around the core of her tooth. So when Sarah's mom comes to pick up her kid the next morning, my mom goes, "Hey, Pam, I'm really worried about your kid spewing blood and her teeth look wicked bad, but like, in a nice southern lady way, you know." I remember Pam was more of a biker chick. Like this big tough woman the size of a car whose wardrobe was 100% Harley Davidson branded clothing and jackets. Anyway, Pam looks at my mom and goes, "Oh, in our family the girls all get their teeth fixed right before they get married. Cool." When I was 15/16, I failed my mock GCSEs. Hard, I didn't even get a grade on most of them, and the few I did was an E. My report cards was full of comments such as, "If not a disguised cat even gets an E on his actual GCSE paper, I will be amazed." So that summer, I worked my ass off. I took myself off to the library every day and studied for 8 hours. I did virtually nothing but revise for 8 weeks. Next term I sat the exams. I had no confidence, but I gave it my best shot. Eventually results day comes around, and I was fearing the worst. I receive the letter and open it, my hands literally shaking. My teacher's predictions were 5 E's and 5 R's. Ungraded. My GCSE results were 1A, 5 B's, 3 C's and 1 D. I was over the fricking moon. I had showed all over those arrogant tossers that I wasn't a lost cause. I was clever enough to pass exams. I wasn't going to fail in life. Excitedly, I ran to the nearest payphone. It was the 90s. Ask your parents. And called mum to tell her the news. Her response: if you'd only done some work over the holiday you could have actually got some decent grades. I called dad, who on hearing my grades said, I'm not disappointed in you, I'm disappointed for you. I spent the rest of the day in tears. My parents and teachers believe that if you shoot down a child's achievements they will work harder to prove you wrong. The truth is that if you tell a child that they are useless enough times, they start to believe it, and they stop trying to succeed. Because what's the point? They know they're going to fail. They've been told they're going to fail their whole lives. This is how personality disorders develop. My kids aren't at the exam stage yet, but whenever they show me their test results or homework marks I have 2 possible responses. Good marks. Well done. You worked hard and you earned that grade. Let's go and get an ice cream. Bad results. Well, it might not be perfect, but you got all of these questions right, and the ones you got wrong we can go through together, and next time you'll get a better mark. Kids need encouragement. If you tell them they are capable of great things by working hard, they'll believe you. Conversely, if you tell them they're failures, they'll believe that too. My parents don't get angry when we fail or get a bad mark. They say that if they saw us studying, but we failed, they would say that they knew we tried, and sometimes teachers get too lazy to grade stuff properly. A family friend of ours used to cup check her son every time he did something she didn't like. Before we were parents ourselves, my wife and I went to Pizza Hut for dinner one night. In the restaurant was a family of 5, maybe 6, eating at a table near ours. Now while I understand full well that kids can get unruly in public, these kids were ridiculous. Screaming, throwing food, running around, and the parents did nothing. They just sat back and talked with each other as if their hex-spawn kids weren't even there. I even overheard them complain about how much the bill was for their entire family. That wasn't even the worst part. When they finally left, the dining room looked like a tornado went through. Half-eaten pizza and trash all over the floor. They didn't even attempt to pick up after themselves. Now I don't prescribe to the notion that you're obligated to clean the place spotless before you leave, but at least lead by good example for your kids and get the junk on the table. My blood boils every time I think of this. I've posted this before, but when my son was like a month old, this lady came up to me at a store and told me to cut the tip off his bottle and put gravy and grits in it to help him sleep at night. I was like, I don't think his little digestive system could handle that. Lol, and she insisted it was good for sleep and I told her that he was already sleeping great but thanks. WTF, who does that? Wouldn't it totally wreak havoc on the kids inside Mayo crazy butt PPL. I saw a parenting method where you let a kid decide everything. From the moment they're able to speak you let them choose to do whatever they want. Now anyone who has kids knows that they don't understand consequences fully, so their bedtimes will be 12 AM. They won't do their homework and they become spoiled brats. Never give a child full control. I've heard the give your child choices thing, but that was it's cold out today. Do you want to wear the blue sweater or the red sweater? Not or you want to wear a princess dress and flip-flops when it's snowing. Go ahead. I wonder if this is a reaction to never having been given choices by their own parents. People do tend to swing to the other end when they have bad experiences. After working in daycares, I can tell you that one of the worst things for a child is when the parents are overprotective. The children see everything as terrifying because their parents are constantly afraid of them hurting themselves. This makes them scared to climb the play equipment, unsure how to interact with other kids, and makes them completely dependent on adults to dress or feed them. They also become scared to try anything new and struggle to learn. Overprotective parents are doing far more harm than whatever they think they're protecting their kids from. Stop talking to your kids like they're still babies when they turn into toddlers. Talk to them as you would to another adult. Dang good advice. I talk to my 2-year-old like a person. I still get excited if she hands me something for play, but other than that, I treat her as if she's an older person. My aunt has a severely disabled child. She is 9 but has the mind of a newborn. She can't talk, walk, or feed herself, and her way of communicating is screaming. My aunt is a pretty good mother now, but when she was 4 she fully admitted to randomly putting duct tape over her mouth and leaving her alone in a room for hours while she passed out due from exhaustion. My dad threatened to call CPS on her and she stopped immediately and got help. That right there is the difference between a horrible person and a person who has done a horrible thing. I was a school teacher in a low-income area. I watched lots of kids raise themselves, or the oldest female having to raise her younger brothers and sisters because the incubator was too busy being intoxicated, partying, making more kids, or doing time. Threats: a child should not fear you. Free-range parenting to the point the kid runs the house. No set schedule like bedtimes. No setting rules on what they can't eat. End result is the child will stay up for 2 days in a row, then sleep all day. Homeschooled, disrupts everyone else's schedule, lives on pizza. I know it's hard to get kids to try new foods, but I'd be worried if my preteen lived on pizza. Oh frick, this is me and I'm 13. I had a friend who would force her kids into a cold shower if they did not eat all their food. Now the kids live their grandparents. Had a neighbor who had really nasty teeth, like, to the point where they were black and looked chipped on every tooth. I eventually asked him why. He said when was a baby his mom gave him nothing but Mountain Dew because it was the only thing that would stop him from crying. It blew my freaking mind. Then I guess the second thing I witnessed was my girlfriend would cuss in front of the kids like it was normal speech. Didn't care or stop even when it was her own kid or someone else's. I'm still with her and I think she's learned that it's wrong. She doesn't do it as much, but I still catch her on a daily basis. At least once or twice. I tell her to stop cussing when she does. My parents cursed in front of me and my siblings all the time. We're no worse for wear because of that. We're worse for wear because they were dickheads. As a product of the creation, I feel obligated to share, but my parents were extremely oppressive. It makes Stalin look meek in comparison. I would be beaten down, broken, bloodied and or bruised and then be told that if you report this to the cops, they'll take you away and you'll be in foster care, where you'll be forgotten. The one time my teacher found evidence of abuse, reported it to CPS, and then my dad made me out to be the bad guy and wouldn't talk to me for a month. Also, they were extreme control freaks. My dad basically does everything around the house. My mom sits down and knits all day, and I'm trying to figure out what the frick to do. My family dynamic is pretty warped, but I'm praying to God that the lessons I learned can be applied here shortly in 3 months. Knew a woman that would give her 14-year-old daughter weed so she would fall asleep and not go out to parties. She used to say a stoned teen was better than a pregnant one. My kids had a friend whose parents would put them in timeout for an hour at a time. They would have to kneel with their legs crossed behind them, hands on the back of their heads with elbows on the walls. Stopped letting my kids go there after they told me that. Had their friends at ours all the time though, and they were very well behaved for me. Like this video and this good boy will play you a nice song. Like and subscribe, you magnificent person.